Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'll be presenting yet another update on my Lair of Darkness video, the Fang of Critias engine, by the way. Really thank you guys, because that video has been doing so well so far. We're almost at 4,000 views with it. So I thought I should go ahead and bring you guys yet another update on it. I've made quite a few changes, nothing too grand, but just things that make this deck run a little bit more smoother and a lot easier. So hopefully you guys will enjoy this. So yeah, let's get started. As you all know, Lair of Darkness is one of my favorite decks to experiment with, especially like the vampires. So like, yeah, it's just like, because there's just so many possibilities with this deck, it's very splashable. So yeah, and of course I already have plans for yet another version of this deck, which I think you guys will definitely love later on. But we'll get to that another day. So starting off, we have 3 copies of Darkus Diabolus. Amazing card. This is literally one of my favorite dragons now because the fact that he cannot be targeted and he cannot be tributed by your opponent, so he's anti-kaiju. But he's so easy to bring out too because like all you have to do is like just tribute one monster you control, whether it's for a summon or for an effect, and you can special summon this card from your hand or your graveyard, and it's once per turn, of course. I don't care too much for his second effect or his first effect, where you tribute one dark monster, pick one random card from your opponent's hand, and then let him choose where it goes, the top or bottom of the deck. So I just kind of always avoid that. But overall, he's still a good card. I don't use that effect where you force your opponent to lose a card. It's just like only if he's stuck with just like 1 or 2 cards left in his hand. So that's the only times I like to use that. But anyway, let's move on. We have 3 copies of Lilith, Lady of Lament. My tongue got stuck for a second. Sorry about that. But anyway, when this card is normal summon, her attack becomes 1,000. But it's really her effect that makes her so great. You can choose quick effect, tribute 1 dark monster, reveal 3 normal traps from your deck, and your opponent has to pick one of those at random, and you get to set one of those cards to your side of the field. So it's basically pantheism. And yeah, and the fact that it's quick effect, you could also do it during your opponent's turn. So you could tribute 1 dark monster or herself, so like she's just great for that reason. And also if you have Lair of Darkness, you could tribute one of your opponent's monsters. So basically the point of this deck is just to keep your opponent completely wide open, just to go for an easy OTK. But the fact that Lilith's just a great way to like search out all your main traps is like just busted. So moving on, we have 3 copies of Arima, who's your terraforming of this deck. You can discard it from your hand, add 1 Lair of Darkness, and also you can tribute 1 dark monster, draw 1 card, or if you tribute a dark monster other than this card, you can activate this effect instead. You can add 1 dark monster with 2,000 more defense from your deck to your hand. So it's a good way to search out your Darkus Diabolus or your Destrudo. But of course, Destrudo most of the time you're going to be pitching anyway, so like you may as well just go for the Darkus Diabolus. Which, speaking of which, moving on, we have 2 copies of Armageddon Knight. This guy is your second and third Foolish Burial, because whenever he's summoned, and it's not once per turn, it's just every time he's summoned, you can send 1 dark monster from your deck to the graveyard. So you send out a Destrudo, bring back Destrudo, make Black Rose Dragon, nuke the board, and if you happen to have a way to revive your cards back, do it. You know, like the only way to do it is to only do it. All right. So for the single monsters, we have, of course, Tour Guide from the Underworld. Amazing card. Like, I could see why she's only at 1. But you can special summon 1 level 3 Fiend-type monster from your hand or your deck, but it has its effects negated. And also cannot be used for synchro material, but that's usually never a problem, because you can use it for, like, Xyz plays, Link plays. You know, it's just great. And what's also good about that is that if you brought out Sangan with this effect, I heard that you can actually still use Sangan's effect, because his ability is a graveyard effect, not a field effect. So that's why it's so good. But of course, I don't run Sangan in this engine. I actually run Skarm, because Skarm at the end of the turn lets me search out Lilith. So, and Lilith's kind of more important. But of course, like in one of my future engines that I will present to you guys later, will run Sangan, and I'll show you how to properly use it. So yeah, still Skarm's a good alternative. I personally like him a little bit more. So yeah, he's just great. Next up, of course, we got a level 3 tuner, Blackwing Steam Cloak. Some people always question, like, what's the point of this guy? He's basically GoFu for this deck, honestly. Like, because when he leaves the field, you can produce a Steam token, and it's each time he leaves the field, too. So, like, that is... Now, here's the thing that is a once per duel part, though. If he's in your graveyard, you can tribute 1 monster on... You can tribute 1 monster, and of course, with Lair, you can tribute one of your opponents. Special summon him, but if you're going to use him for synchro material, you can only use it for material towards a Blackwing monster. Of course, we don't run any Blackwing synchro monsters, so... But he's still a good way to bring out a first turn Decode Talker if you can manage to pull it off. I've actually done it quite a lot, so... Because, like, I've opened up with him a little too early, and I normally don't like to do that. But I still managed to make use of it somehow and just made him into a made into a deco talker, so it wasn't really too difficult to pull off. But yeah, great card overall. I definitely recommend at least running one of him. Of course, we run Dark Arm Dragon. It's really not hard to get at least exactly 3 dark monsters in your graveyard. It's really not. So Dark Arm Dragon is actually really easy to bring out. And of course, we got the one Destrudo. So yeah, Destrudo also helps out a lot to get your single plays going, and it's just badass. All right, so moving on to the spells now, we have, of course, 3 copies of Lair of Darkness. Best spell in this deck, honestly, because it turns everything to dark. And of course, you can attribute one of your opponent's monsters once per turn for an effect. So yeah, and also at the end of the turn, you can produce torment tokens on either player's field, depending on whose turn it was. So if it was my turn, I get the tokens. If it was my opponent's turn, he gets the tokens. But of course, that's at the end of the turn, so like your opponent doesn't really get any use of those tokens because you're just going to get rid of them right away anyway. Now, as I mentioned, this is the Fang of Critias build, so of course you run 3 Fang of Critias because you're going to be able to bring out all your best fusion monsters this way. And since all the traps you need to bring out the Fang of Critias fusions are all searchable, that's why Fang of Critias is definitely a must at 3. Now, I decided to bump this down to 2 now, just to make room for another card. But, of course, I sometimes go back and forth to make it a 3, but it's Lair of Darkness. Since this deck is very spell and trap heavy, I felt like Lair of Darkness wasn't quite as needed. You still do definitely need it for sure, because you do need some extra draw power. But sometimes I like to go back and forth, like make it 3 Lair of Darkness and 2 Fang of Critias, or just kind of like, just do it that way. It's like, it really doesn't hurt you too much, so Lair of Darkness, still a must. At least at 2. 3, again, is still a good number. Like, I like to go back and forth. Alright, now for the single spells, we got 1 Monster Gate, which is your reasoning of this deck, so it's really good, and it helps you bleed out your deck. That way you can get to everything else you need faster. I decided to run Rhoda, just because like you need to search out that Armageddon Knight as quickly as you can. Just that way you can start getting your Foolish Burial plays going faster and get all your best monsters into the grave. That way you can start like really dishing out some pain. 1 Foolish Burial. And of course, Monster Reborn. And that's it for the spells. Alright, for the traps, I decided to run 3 back to the front because this card's just straight up good. And if you didn't open up with any of them, you could use Lilith's effect, and your opponent doesn't really have a choice to use. And of course, you could just bring back Lilith next turn if you use her effect to tribute herself off. Because this deck to me is best going second. But if you go first, you never know what could happen. So yeah, back to the front, definitely a good card at 3. And sometimes I bump it down to 2 just to make room for something else, like on the side. But anyway, I decided to run 2 Metaverse. Best card for, like, better than Terraforming in this deck, because if your opponent MSTs, Cosmic Cyclones, Twin Twisters, your Lair of Darkness, you can easily play this card and play a new Lair of Darkness directly from your deck. Because you got to keep that card out on the field as long as you possibly can. Because you can't let your opponent, like, gain control. Because that's the whole point of Lair of Darkness, to keep your opponent from gaining control. And of course, we have 2 Mirror Forces. No one really expects it anymore, but of course, to make the Mirror Force Dragon. 2 Crush cards, which again, also make it for Doom Virus. 1 Eradicator, which is really good against Sky Strikers. Pretty much anything that's spell heavy. Even Gokis are weak to this card. 1 Ring of Destruction. I decided to just bump it down to 1, just because Ring of Destruction wasn't as neat as I initially thought it was. So, like, even 1 is still pretty good. And 1 Heavy Storm. I was running it at 2 last time, but I figured just 1 will do because I'm seeing a lot less of those cards that I mentioned last time, like the Shadow Imprisoning Mirrors. But you still want to be able to take out like back row cards like Torrential Tribute, because I know some Trickstar players still play that. So you got to get rid of those. And of course, it's a good way to get rid of their reincarnations too, because you don't want them to banish your hands. You need your hands on this. So yeah, definitely at least 1. And sometimes I will slide in my second one if I have to, depending on what I'm up against. Alright, so moving on to this extra deck now. Starting off, we have 2 copies of Doom Virus Dragon. A guy was cool enough to hook me up with these since he saw me that I was playing them, so I decided to run it back up to 2. And yeah, those are the original secret rares, so yeah, I was really happy with those. 1 Mirror Force Dragon, because it is revivable, so that's why I only run it at 1. Because like if I get rid of it, I could just bring it back with Back to the Front easily, or Monster Reborn. And same thing with Destruction Dragon, just because he's a 3k brick wall. So, like, and the fact that once per turn you could destroy any card on your opponent's side of the field, and if it's a monster, you inflict damage. And Mirror Force Dragon's great because, you get to, anytime your opponent targets a card, or by battle or card effect, you get to wipe out his entire board. And with Doom Virus, since it doesn't have the negative effect of Crush card, where like your opponent won't take any battle damage, Doom Virus is the better option. You get to look at his entire hand, destroy any monsters among them that have 1,500 or more attack points, and all the ones on his field, present on the field, also get destroyed. So Doom Virus is definitely great. Alright, so now we're moving on to the Synchros. We got one copy of Black Rose Dragon. Of course, like, this card is so relevant now because you need to be able to nuke the board. One copy of Beals, just because it's super easy to build, make two. Now, a lot of people have actually asked me a lot in the comments, like, how do I bring this one out? Critias, the Nether Soul Dragon. This guy, okay, there's two ways you can bring it out, but the main way I always bring it out is, like, since Black Rose Dragon is the level 7, and I have Blackwing Steam the Cloak, as long as I don't use Blackwing Steam the Cloak's graveyard effect, I can use him for material since he is a Dark-type tuner. And I need a Dragon-type non-tuner monster, so Black Rose is level 7, and of course 7 plus 3 is 10. So that's how you bring out Critias. So, like, Critias just can't be destroyed in battle, and also, once at the start of your standby phase, you can target one face-up monster your opponent controls. Its attack becomes half, and also you inflict damage to your opponent equal to the lost attack. So that's why I run Critias. Alright, so for the links, we have, of course, one Link Spider, because you're going to be producing tokens quite a bit. So, like, I figured, but still, one is just fine, just because, like, I don't really rely on it too much. One Underclock Taker. You may as well, because it points down, right? Of course, Master King Archfiend, because your tokens also become Fiend type monsters, so you can use it for material. Trigate Wizard, as I mentioned, is so good. Now, like, it's just really relevant for this meta. Deco Tucker, standard. Now, personally, I'd rather run Topologic Bomber Dragon rather than this card, but it's just, you gotta work with what you have, so I run Topologic Trisbania. Honestly, like, the only times you should use this card is, like, as long as you have no back row, special summon something, banish that monster, and then banish all back row cards, like, because your opponent's bound to have plenty of those. And then from there, you inflict damage to your opponent. Or if you have cards that you're willing to just spare, get rid of them. Or if you happen to have extra copies in your hand, and just, like, yeah, banish everything you have and reset your back row. That's all you gotta do. So yeah, Topologic Trisbania. Risky, but it does come handy, especially for late game. Honestly, you know what? That's my advice. If you're going to use this card, use it for late game only. Next up, of course, we got Firewall. And lastly, Saryuja. Saryuja really gives this deck some extra synergy. Oh, excuse me. But yeah, definitely a great card. A little trickier to run it in this deck, but it's still good. You know, like, in case if you can manage to pull this off, Saryuja is definitely going to help you out quite a lot. So I definitely recommend it along with the Firewall. So yeah, but again, with Topologic Trisbane, I recommend Topologic Bomber Dragon more, because, like, since you're going to be producing tokens quite a bit, you can keep nuking the board, like the main monster zones, as long as you have it. But I don't have a Topologic Bomber Dragon, so I had to stick with Trisbane a little bit more. All right, so moving on to the side deck, which I've actually changed quite a bit, because I can actually change this engine out entirely for another deck if I wanted to. But I have 3 copies of DD Crow. Because, you know, like, he combos off so well with Grinning Grave Virus. Still sticking to Vampire Hunter, because, you know, everything becomes dark with Lair of Darkness, and he'll destroy anything that's dark. And he's searchable through Rhoda as well, so, like, if you want to run both Armageddon Knight and Vampire Hunter, I definitely recommend it. And, of course, we have Fiendish Rhino Warrior. Excellent card, just because, like, this card, while he's out, Fiend-type monsters you control cannot be destroyed by battle or card effects. And if this card is sent to the graveyard, you can send one Fiend monster from your deck to the graveyard except himself, and you can only use this effect once per turn. But it's a good way, like, to send out Skarm as well, just so that way you can get an additional effect to search out your Lilith. So yeah, these cards are really great monster sides, so I definitely recommend them. And for those spells, again, I do run the 3rd Lair of Darkness, and enemy controller's still in here, just on the side. Just because it's hilarious to pull off, because, like, you could tribute one of your opponent's monsters to take control of a monster if Lair's out. So that's why I was like, alright, you know what, we'll just side it and exchange it out for Rhoda and some other cards. So yeah. And for the traps, we have 3 copies of Grinning Grave. And now it does have its own risk, of course, but of course if you have cards like Mind Crush, because this card does let you look at your opponent's hand, Mind Crush is definitely a good side-off in today's meta. And also, like, Grinning Grave, as I've mentioned, combos so well with DD Crow, because since your opponent can't activate any the monster effects that he destroys with this card's effect on the same turn. That's why I only run it at 3. And for the last 2 cards, of course, as I mentioned, I run my second Heavy Storm Duster, and I found that this card was pretty funny to run in this deck too as a side. But if you want to dish out some punishment to your opponent, Magic Cylinder. It's just so hilarious because it's searchable, and the fact that if your opponent has a card with high level attack that can be targeted, use it and just do some damage to your opponent. It's just so good. So yeah, that's pretty much all I have for you guys today. Hope you guys enjoyed this update a lot more than the last one, and yeah, I'll catch you again next time.